The sky over Varath Prime had not been blue in 6 months. It was always gray now, thick with smoke and ash, the kind of sky that made you feel like the world itself had given up. The clouds rolled in heavy and dark every morning, and by afternoon the horizon would glow a dull, angry orange from fires burning somewhere far away. Commander Zorath stood at the tall window of the command station and looked out at that sky. He had been standing there for a long time. He was not really looking at the sky. He was thinking about how many days they had left. The answer was not many. The Keth had arrived 11 cycles ago. Before that, Zorath had heard the reports, the same as everyone else. A civilization from the far edge of the known galaxy, expanding outward in every direction, consuming every world they touched, not colonizing, not negotiating, consuming. They came, they destroyed whatever defense existed, and then they stayed. And the people who had lived on those worlds before, those who survived, became workers, slaves, or they simply disappeared. 14 planets had already fallen to the Keth. Zorath had read every report from every one of them. He had studied the battle records. He had spent nights trying to find the pattern, the weakness, the one thing that could be used against them. He had found nothing useful. The Keth were not careless. They were not emotional. They advanced like a machine, step by step, always prepared, always precise. They did not overextend. They did not leave flanks open. They did not panic. They were, in short, almost impossible to fight. Varath Prime was the 15th world in their path, and right now it was dying. Then Zorath turned away from the window when he heard footsteps behind him. It was his second-in-command, Lutus Ervan. Ervan was younger, with gray-green scales and eyes that always looked slightly too wide, like he was permanently surprised by how bad things had gotten. He carried a data tablet in both hands, and his expression was the one he wore when the news was too heavy to hold alone. The Eastern defensive line broke 2 hours ago, Ervan said. He set the tablet down on the table and pointed to a map that covered almost the full surface. Red zones covered nearly a third of it. The ground units that were holding the river crossing retreated south. There was no other choice. The Keth sent 4 armored columns at once. Our people could not hold against all 4. Zorath nodded slowly. He had expected this. The bunker district? He asked. Still ours. For now. About 900 soldiers and roughly 4,000 civilians are sheltering in the lower levels. But if the Keth push through the southern avenue, even the bunkers won't hold for long. Zorath walked to the table and looked at the map. The red zones kept spreading in his mind even when he closed his eyes. He had spent 40 years in the Varath military. He had fought in 3 wars before this one. He had lost friends and subordinates and people he loved. But he had never, not once in 4 decades, felt what he felt right now, standing in this room with this map in front of him. He felt finished, not personally finished. He was not afraid of dying. He had made peace with that possibility long ago. He felt finished in the way a soldier feels when he finally understands, deep in his bones, that the fight is already lost, that everything being done now is only delaying the inevitable, that the end is not a question of whether, only when. Sir, Ervan said quietly. Zorath looked at him. There is still the signal, Ervan said. The one we sent out 40 rotations ago. There was a response. Zorath said nothing for a moment. He knew about the signal. The Coalition Council had authorized it weeks ago in a closed session that most members had left feeling embarrassed about, like they had done something beneath their dignity. The signal had been sent out to several spacefaring civilizations in the wider galactic community, a formal request for military assistance. Most had not responded at all. 2 had responded with polite regrets and careful diplomatic language that meant no. And 1 had responded with something else. The humans, Zorath said. Yes. Ervan pulled up the communication log on the tablet. A vessel called the UES Ironclad has been holding position at the edge of the Varun belt for the past 3 rotations. They are waiting for permission to enter Vareth space. They have not pushed through without permission, even though they could have. "One ship," Zorath said. "One ship," Ervan confirmed. Zorath sat down. He rubbed the side of his face with one hand and stared at the table. One ship, against the Keth fleet that currently had 47 capital vessels sitting in orbit above Vareth Prime, running bombardment schedules and preparing a full planetary siege array to be assembled over the northern continent. One ship, sent by a civilization that was, by galactic standards, very young, very small, and not particularly well regarded by the older species who had been traveling the stars for centuries. He had read the intelligence files on humans. Every senior officer in the coalition had been given those files after the Keth War began, partly because humans occupied space along one of the potential Keth expansion routes, and partly because some junior analyst at Coalition Intelligence had flagged them as a species worth watching. The files were strange to read. Humans were small, physically unimpressive, had a short lifespan by galactic standards, and had only been a space-faring civilization for a relatively brief time. But there were other reports in those files. Accounts from species who had observed human military engagements, after-action summaries from conflicts where humans had been involved. The account of what had happened at the siege of Dolar 4, where a Keth advance had run directly into a human-defended outpost and been stopped cold for the first time in Keth recorded history. The report from the Crescent Nebula engagement, where a human fleet half the size of the Keth force had not only held the line but pushed the Keth back 17 light-years. Zorath had read those reports. He had read them more than once, and each time he had finished he had sat quietly and tried to understand what he was reading. The Keth always won. That was simply the reality. They won by being bigger, stronger, more prepared, and completely without fear. Every species they had ever faced had eventually broken, not because they were weak, necessarily, but because the Keth were relentless, and relentless things break you eventually. But the humans had not broken. The humans, according to every piece of intelligence Zorath had been able to find, had looked at the Keth and done something almost no other species had managed to do. They had looked right back. "Grant them passage," Zorath said. Ervan blinked. "Sir?" "The humans. Grant the ironclad permission to enter Vareth space." He stood again and looked out the window at the gray sky. "Send the crew our full tactical situation. Every map, every patrol route we know, every piece of data we have on the Keth positions. Give them everything." "Yes, sir." Ervan started for the door, then paused. "Sir, do you really think one ship can change anything?" Zorath was quiet for a moment. Outside, somewhere to the east, there was a deep, low rumble that shook the walls of the building slightly. Another bombardment at another part of the city. Gone. "I think," Zorath said carefully, "that we have run out of other options. And I think the reports I have read about humans are either very exaggerated, in which case we lose anyway, or they are not exaggerated at all." He paused. "I would like to find out which one it is before the end." Ervan nodded once and left the room. Zorath stood at the window for a long time after that, watching the orange glow on the horizon grow slowly brighter, and waited to see what one human ship would do. The UES Ironclad came out of faster-than-light travel at exactly 0400 hours, Vareth Standard Time, and the first thing Lieutenant Dale Owens noticed when he stepped onto the bridge was the smell of fresh coffee coming from the small pot near the navigation console. And the second thing he noticed was that the sensor board was already full of red. Corporal Nina Voss was at the sensor station, leaning forward with both hands flat on her desk, reading the data as it came in. She was one of the best sensor operators Dale had ever worked with. She had a quiet way of delivering terrible news that made it somehow easier to hear, like she was simply reading facts off a list, and none of it had anything to do with dying. 47 Keth capital ships in high orbit, she said, without looking up. 212 destroyers spread across 3 orbital bands. There is also a large structure being assembled above the northern continent. From the shape and energy signature, I am reading it as a planetary siege array, probably about 60% complete. Dale picked up the coffee, poured himself a cup, and stood in front of the tactical display. The red markers covered most of the screen. He counted them slowly, the way he always did, because counting things helped him think. 47 capital ships. He had seen worse, not much worse, but worse. "Get me Colonel Reeves," he said. Colonel Donna Reeves came onto the bridge 3 minutes later. She had her dark hair pulled back, and she was already reading from her datapad, scrolling through the tactical summary that Nina had sent to her cabin the moment the ironclad dropped out of warp. She was dressed fully, which meant she had not been sleeping. She rarely slept well before a fight, not because she was afraid, but because her mind kept working through problems she had not solved yet. She stopped next to Dale and looked at the display for a long moment without speaking. 60% on the siege array," Dale said. 6 hours, maybe 8 before it is operational. Once that thing fires, the bunker district is gone." Donna nodded. "Where are our ground teams?" "Hangar Bay. They have been ready since we crossed into Varath space." Donna looked at him. "You told them to get ready before we even had permission to enter." "I told them to be ready just in case," Dale said simply. The corner of Donna's mouth moved, not quite a smile. She turned back to the display. The Varath sent their full tactical data. Their ground forces are broken into small groups, mostly in the southern bunkers and some scattered in the ruins of the city. They have no unified defensive line. The Keth are moving through the city in column formations, methodical, 4 to 6 columns at a time. "Predictable," Dale said. "Very." Donna set the datapad down on the console and crossed her arms. "The Keth think this is already finished. They are not in a combat mindset anymore. They are in a cleanup mindset." "That is a mistake." "Yes, it is." She straightened and turned to face the bridge crew. Every person in the room was already looking at her, waiting. They had all seen the sensor board. They all knew what was waiting for them out there. And not one of them looked like they wanted to turn around. That was the thing about the Ironclad's crew that Donna had noticed from her first week commanding the ship. They were not reckless. They were not stupid. Every single one of them understood danger perfectly well and could calculate odds just fine. They simply did not let those odds make decisions for them. When they listened to the numbers and then they went ahead and did what needed doing anyway. "Battle stations," she said. "All Marine teams to the hangar bay in full kit. I want the dropships prepped and ready in 20 minutes. Electronic warfare team, I need you running warm. Navigation, I need micro-jump solutions calculated for at least 6 positions around the Keth fleet. We are not sitting still out here." The bridge came alive with movement and voices. Everyone moving to their tasks with the calm, focused energy of people who had done this before. Down in the hangar bay, Sergeant Lou Carver was already checking his squad's equipment for the 3rd time. That was Lou's way. He always checked 3 times. Not because he did not trust his people, but because 3 checks meant there was almost no chance anything was wrong. So an almost no chance was as close to certainty as a person could get. His squad consisted of 7 soldiers. Private Cora Hensley, who handled reconnaissance and drone operations, and could read a battlefield from sensor data the way some people read books. Private Gus Tran, who was the best shot in the squad, and also had a habit of making jokes at exactly the wrong moment. Private Ada Ruiz, who carried more medical equipment than anyone and had saved 4 lives on the last deployment. And 3 others, Cole, Danny, and Priya, all experienced, all steady, all ready. Lou gathered them around him in the hangar bay while the dropships were being prepped. "You have all seen the briefing data," he said. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. When Lou spoke, people listened because he never wasted words. "The city is a mess. Iketh columns moving through the streets in standard formation. They are not expecting resistance because the Varath ground forces are finished. They think this is over. They think wrong, Gus said. They think wrong, Lou agreed. Our primary objective is the bunker district. 900 Varath soldiers and 4,000 civilians are in there. If the Keth reach the main avenue before we set up, those people have no way out. We are going to stop the columns before they get there. He looked around at each of them. The Keth walkers are the problem. They are heavily armored, and the shields on the front are nearly impossible to punch through with standard weapons. But the intelligence files show a gap at the joint where the forward shield array connects to the chassis, just behind the left shoulder of the machine. That is the spot. We have run the simulation. It works. What about the infantry units supporting the walkers? Cora asked. Smoke and flanking. We do not stand and fight them head-on. We hit the walker, we move, we hit again from somewhere else. Lou looked at each face one more time. Any questions? No one had any questions. They never did, by the third time Lou briefed. The first briefing was for information. The second was for questions. The third was for focus. High above them, in orbit, Colonel Donna Reeves was doing something that the Keth fleet commanders would not understand until it was too late. She was not attacking. She was thinking. The Ironclad had powerful electronic warfare systems specifically designed to create false readings on enemy sensors. Donna had used them before. She knew exactly what a Keth fleet's sensors were looking for. Size, energy signatures, transponder codes. She had her electronic warfare officer begin broadcasting a pattern of false signals from 6 different angles around the outer system, each one suggesting a different vessel, each one carrying the signature profile of Terran military ships. To the Keth sensor teams, it would look like a battle group was arriving. Not one ship. Many ships. They will not believe it indefinitely, her electronic warfare officer, Lieutenant Glenn Park, said. An hour, maybe 2, before their analysis team figures out it is false. 2 hours is enough, Donna said. By then, the ground teams will already be in position, and we will have moved to the next phase. She sat in the command chair and watched the Keth fleet on the display. In 47 capital ships, each one larger than the Ironclad, each one carrying more firepower. She was not unaware of the numbers. She simply looked at those numbers the way Dale looked at them, the way all of them did, as a problem to be solved rather than a wall to stop behind. Outside the Ironclad's hull, space was very quiet. The Keth were still organizing, still completing their siege array, still believing that nothing could stop what had already begun. In the hangar bay, the dropship's engine started to warm up. The first wave of human soldiers was going in. The dropship came down hard and fast through the smoke, the way they always did, because a slow dropship was an easy target, and Lou Carver had no interest in being an easy target. They hit the ground on the western edge of what had once been a market district. And the buildings around them were broken. Walls collapsed inward, roofs gone, streets covered in rubble and glass, and things that had once been useful and were now just debris. The sky above was that same dull orange-gray that pressed down on everything like a weight. It smelled like burning. The squad moved out the moment the ramp came down, spreading into a loose line, rifles up, moving between the collapsed walls with practiced ease. There was no talking. They communicated with hand signals and the short bursts of information that came through their helmet comms. Lou moved at the front, reading the street ahead, while Cora's drone, a small, flat disc that hummed almost silently, rose above the rooftops and began sending back a live picture of the surrounding streets. 2 Keth infantry units 2 blocks north, Cora said in his earpiece. Moving east. They have not seen us. Lou raised a fist. Everyone stopped. He watched the feed on the small display mounted inside his visor. 2 Keth infantry units, maybe 12 soldiers in total, moving in a tight column down a side street. Their exosuits caught the gray light and reflected it in dull metallic patches. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who expected no resistance, heads not scanning, pace steady, no rear guard. Lou lowered his fist and pointed left. The squad moved left, cutting through a crumbled building to come around behind a low section of broken wall that gave them a sight line on the street the Keth were about to cross. When the Keth column passed through the intersection, Lou's squad was already set. It lasted less than a minute. When it was over, the intersection was empty of living Keth, and Lou's squad moved on without stopping. They had no time to stop. The main objective was still 12 blocks south, and every minute spent standing still was a minute the Keth columns were using to push closer to the bunker district. "Walker coming around the North Avenue," Cora said. "Big one. Shield array is active." Lou had been waiting for the walkers. They were the real problem. The Keth used them as the center of their assault formations, a heavy machine that walked on 4 massive legs, carried 2 gun arrays capable of leveling a building in 3 shots, and had a forward shield strong enough to shrug off most conventional weapons. Varath anti-armor teams had been trying to stop Keth walkers for months and losing badly. Lou's squad had a different approach. He had spent 3 full days aboard the Ironclad before they ever entered Vareth space, reading every technical file on Keth Walker design that Terran intelligence had collected. He had reviewed footage from every engagement where a Keth Walker had been destroyed or damaged. He had noticed a pattern. Not obvious, but there. The shield array was nearly impenetrable from the front. From the sides, it was a little weaker. From behind, weaker still. But the critical point was the joint connection, the bracket system that attached the shield array to the walker's main chassis. If that bracket was hit hard enough, in the right spot, the shield array did not just weaken, it detached. And a Keth walker with no shield was just a large machine made of metal. They had simulated it 6 times aboard the Ironclad. It worked every time. And the problem was reaching that spot. The joint bracket was at the left shoulder of the walker, and getting behind a Keth walker while it was in the middle of a combat sweep required patience, timing, and the ability to move through city rubble very quickly without being seen. Lou assigned Cole and Danny to the distraction. A burst of fire from the north end of the street to draw the walker's attention and make it turn. He took Cora, Gus, and Priya in a wide arc through 3 demolished buildings, moving fast, crouching low, using every piece of cover available. Ada and the remaining member of the squad held the south end in case infantry support came around the corner. The walker turned toward Cole and Danny's fire. Its gun arrays swung north. Its legs shifted, repositioning its weight. And for just a few seconds, its left shoulder was fully exposed. Gus was already in position. He fired twice. Both shots hit the joint bracket. There was a sharp, mechanical sound like a cable snapping under tension, and the shield array on the front of the walker flickered, sparked at the edges, and went dark. The walker was still dangerous. Its guns were still active, but now it was exposed. Lou's team hit it from 2 sides simultaneously. The shots found the exposed plating beneath where the shield had been, and 2 minutes later, the walker was down. 1 leg collapsed under it, its systems cycling into a shutdown sequence. Lou was already moving again before the noise stopped. "1 down," Gus said through the comm. He sounded almost cheerful. "3 more in the district," Cora said. "Sio, and a column of about 60 infantry closing on the main avenue from the east." 60 is a lot, Ada said. 60 is manageable, Lou said. "We do not fight them directly. We break the column, hit the front, hit the rear, and the middle has nowhere to go and no orders to follow." There was a brief silence on the comm. "Sometimes," Gus said, "I think you actually enjoy this." "I enjoy problems that can be solved," Lou said, and kept moving. 3 blocks ahead, the bunker district entrance was sealed. A massive reinforced door built into the side of what had been a government building, its walls still standing despite everything around them. Somewhere behind that door, nearly 5,000 Varath soldiers and civilians were waiting. They had been listening to the sounds of the battle for hours. Lou knew that. That he knew how it felt to be on the other side of a sealed door, hearing fighting come closer and having no way to know who was winning or losing. He had been there before, years ago on a different world with a different enemy. He remembered what it felt like, not fear exactly, but a kind of hollow waiting that was worse than fear, because at least fear gave you something to push against. He wanted to get to that door. The 60-unit Keth infantry column was the last obstacle. Lou spread his squad wide, using the rubble of the avenue as cover, setting positions at both the front and the rear of the street the column would have to pass through. When the Keth reached the midpoint, both ends of their column came under fire at the same moment. The front stopped, the rear tried to turn back, the middle was caught between them. And the Keth were disciplined. They did not panic easily, but a column that cannot move forward and cannot move back and cannot figure out where the fire is coming from has no good options. By the time their unit commander was trying to reorganize them, Lou's squad had already shifted position twice, and the column had lost a third of its strength. The remaining Keth fell back. Lou did not pursue them. That was not the objective. He walked to the bunker door and knocked on it with his fist. 3 hard raps, pause, 2 more, the signal code the Varath communications team had given them during the briefing aboard the Ironclad. There was a long pause. Then slowly, the door opened. The Varath officer on the other side was a young soldier, shorter than Lou, with wide yellow eyes and a face that had clearly not slept in days. He looked at Lou. And he looked at the small squad behind him. He looked at the street where the Keth column had been, now empty and quiet. "You are human," the officer said. His voice carried a mix of things, surprise, relief, and something that might have been the very early beginning of hope. "Yeah," Lou said. "Avenue is clear. Start moving your people south toward the harbor. We will cover you." The Varath officer stood in the doorway for one more moment, just staring, like he could not quite believe what he was looking at. Then he turned back inside and began giving orders. High above the burning city, the battle was quieter, but no less dangerous. Colonel Donna Reeves stood in the center of the Ironclad's bridge, watching 3 different screens at once. The left screen showed the Keth fleet positions, updated every 40 seconds by Nina's sensor sweeps. The right screen showed the ground situation, a live tactical map fed by the squad comms and Cora's drone network. The center screen was the one she kept returning to, the electronic warfare display, where Lieutenant Glenn Park was managing a web of false signals so carefully constructed that it would take any Keth analyst time to unravel. So far, the plan was holding. The false transponder signals had done exactly what Donna expected. The Keth fleet, reading what appeared to be a full Terran battle group arriving from the outer system, had repositioned 14 of their capital ships to intercept. Those 14 ships were now 300,000 kilometers away from the main fleet cluster, engines hot, guns forward, waiting for a battle group that did not exist. That left 33 capital ships, still not good odds, but better. "Aye, sir," said Glenn, not looking up from his board. "The Keth flagship has just sent a new analysis request to its sensor team. They are starting to question the signatures. How long before they decide it is false?" "Hard to say. Their analysis team is good. I would estimate 40 minutes, maybe less." Donna nodded. She turned to Lieutenant Dale Owens. "What is the status on the siege array?" "Ground team confirms they have reached the assembly site," Dale said. "Sergeant Carver detached 2 soldiers and 2 Varath engineers to the power coupling access point. They are working on it now. Tell them they have 30 minutes. "Understood." Donna walked to the tactical display and put both hands on the edge of the table. She looked at the map of the Keth fleet positions for a long moment, reading it the way she always read a battlefield. Not as a fixed thing, but as something alive that was constantly shifting and changing and could be pushed in different directions if you understood it well enough. She had studied the Keth method of fleet combat extensively. They were very good at it. They fought in coordinated layers. Capital ships at the rear providing fire support, destroyers at the front absorbing initial contact, smaller units at the flanks watching for encirclement attempts. It was a strong system. It had worked well for them against every species they had ever faced. The weakness was that it was rigid. The Keth relied on perfect coordination between their vessels. Every ship in the formation had a specific role, and every role was defined by the command orders that came down from the flagship. When the formation was intact and communication was clear, they were nearly unbeatable. But if the communication became disrupted, if the flagship could not relay clear orders, if the individual commanders started receiving conflicting information or no information at all, the formation did not adapt. It waited for new orders that sometimes never came, and while it was waiting, it was vulnerable. Donna had spent the better part of 2 days before the ironclad left Terran space, designing a strike sequence built entirely around that weakness. "Glenn," she said, "begin Phase 2. Glenn's fingers moved across his board. The ironclad's weapon systems were powerful, but Donna was not going to use them the way the Keth expected, not big, broad salvos aimed at destroying ships. Instead, the ironclad began firing long-range precision shots, and each one targeted at a specific system on a specific Keth ship, not the engines, not the gun arrays, the communication masts. The first shot hit the destroyer on the eastern flank of the fleet, taking out its primary relay antenna. The second shot hit a mid-class cruiser near the center formation, destroying its command broadcast array. The third hit the closest capital ship at an angle that punched cleanly through its secondary communication tower. None of the ships were destroyed. They were still flying, still armed, but they were going deaf and dumb. "Flagship is issuing a fleet-wide order to tighten formation," Nina said from her sensor station. 3 destroyers are moving to close the gap left by the 2 we just hit." "That is exactly what I want," Donna said. "Let them tighten. When they pull inward, they leave the flanks open." She glanced at Dale. "Are the Varath frigates in position?" 4 frigates holding in the asteroid field. Engines cold, running silent. They are waiting for the targeting solutions. "Send them." The 4 Varath frigates had been hiding in the asteroid field of Varath's second moon for 2 days. They were damaged, low on ammunition, and their crews were exhausted. But they were still functional, and they were still crewed by soldiers who had been watching their world burn for 11 cycles and had a great deal of anger left in them. When the ironclad's targeting data came through, the Varath captains did not hesitate. They came out of the asteroid field at full speed, 4 small ships against a fleet of 33. It should not have mattered. But they were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were using the targeting solutions Donna had sent them, hitting the same systems she had been targeting, communication arrays and sensor nodes, and the relay buoys that the Keth used to keep their formation synchronized. The Varath frigates hit and moved, never staying still long enough to draw a concentrated response. The Keth formation, already disrupted by the false battle group alarm that had drawn off 14 ships, was now struggling to maintain coordination. Destroyers were waiting for orders that were being delayed by damaged relay systems. Capital ships were issuing conflicting instructions because their commanders could not get clear data on where the attacks were coming from. "Sir," Nina said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite excitement but was close to it. "The Keth flagship is repositioning. It is moving away from the center of the formation. It is trying to get better sensor coverage," Donna said. "It needs to see the whole picture." "It is also exposed," Dale said quietly. "If it moves to that position, it is outside the defensive screen of the capital ships." Donna looked at the screen. The flagship was large, bigger than any other vessel in the Keth fleet. Directly attacking it would be a risk. If the ironclad fired on the flagship and missed, or failed to cause enough damage, the Keth would know exactly where the ironclad was and the full fleet would respond. But the flagship was the brain of the operation. Cut off the brain and the body stopped functioning correctly. "Glenn?" I need a clean targeting solution on the flagship's command bridge sensor array, Donna said. Not the whole ship, just the sensor array. I want it blind, not angry. Working on it, Glenn said. 40 seconds later, he had it. The ironclad fired once. The shot traveled 360,000 kilometers in a straight line and struck the Keth flagship's primary sensor array with the precision of a needle finding a specific point on a map. The array exploded outward in a spray of debris. The flagship was still moving, still powered, its weapons still active. But now it was flying blind, receiving no external sensor data, unable to see anything beyond its own hull. A blind flagship could not coordinate a fleet. The effect was not immediate, but it was steady. Over the next 90 minutes, the Keth formation slowly lost cohesion, and ships began to move without clear purpose. Some closed formation, some held position. 2 destroyers, apparently receiving no orders at all, drifted out of formation entirely and began a slow orbit of the planet that served no tactical function whatsoever. Ground team reports the siege array is offline, Dale said, reading a message from the comm station. Lou's team used the Verath engineers to overload the power coupling. The array lost structural integrity. It is not going to fire. Something in Donna's chest loosened slightly. Good. What is the status on the civilians? Moving south from the bunker district. Verath military units are escorting them. Lou's squad is covering the rear. Donna looked at the display. The Keth fleet was still large, still powerful, but it was confused. It was disorganized. And the 14 ships that had chased the Ghost battle group were now receiving conflicting recall orders and counter-orders from a flagship that could not see what was happening. The destroyers were not coordinating. The capital ships were holding position and waiting for orders that were being transmitted through damaged relay chains and arriving corrupted or not at all. Sir, Nina said. Her voice was very steady. Keth fleet is changing vector. The capital ships are pulling back. 3 of them, then 5, then 8. They are moving away from orbital position. The bridge was quiet for a moment. They are retreating, Dale said. He sounded like a man who had expected this and still was not quite used to hearing it. They are retreating, Donna confirmed. She watched the screen. One by one, the red markers began to shift outward. Moving away from Verath Prime, heading toward the outer system. Not destroyed, not defeated in the traditional sense. Simply no longer willing to continue a battle that had stopped making sense to them. The Keth understood force. They understood numbers. What they did not understand, and could not model, was an enemy that kept finding new ways to make the numbers irrelevant. Donna sat down in the command chair for the first time in 9 hours. Glenn, she said, broadcast on all Verath military frequencies. Tell them the orbital situation has changed. Glenn sent the message. Below, on the surface of Verath Prime, thousands of people looked up at a sky that was still gray and still smelled of smoke, but no longer had 47 Keth capital ships sitting in it. It was not victory yet, but it was something. It was the beginning of the possibility of victory, and for a world that had stopped believing in that possibility 11 cycles ago, it was enough to start breathing again. 3 days after the Keth fleet left the orbit of Verath Prime, Commander Zorath walked through what remained of his city. He did this alone, without guards or staff. He told Ervan he needed an hour, and Ervan had the good sense not to argue. Zorath moved slowly through the ruined streets of Verath City, his hands behind his back, his eyes taking in everything. The broken buildings, the burned-out vehicles that still sat where they had been destroyed, some of them weeks ago, some of them just days ago. The places where walls had stood for hundreds of years and now were just low piles of stone and dust. A lot had been taken, and he did not try to push that down or look away from it. He let himself see all of it, clearly and honestly, the way a commander was supposed to see things. But the Keth were gone. That fact sat in the center of everything else, solid and real. The Keth had come. The Keth had brought their fleet and their walkers and their siege array and their doctrine of total, inevitable destruction, and they had left without finishing what they came to do. Varath Prime was still standing. Zorath stopped at the edge of what had been the harbor district. The water was still there, gray and quiet, catching the pale light of morning in flat silver patches. The docks were damaged but not gone. Somewhere along the waterline he could already hear the sound of machinery, his people, beginning the long work of clearing and rebuilding, because that was what his people did. They were stubborn in that way. They had always been stubborn. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Colonel Donna Reeves was walking toward him across the open ground near the water, alone, her hands in the pockets of her jacket. She looked different outside the context of a command bridge, smaller somehow, more ordinary. Her scar caught the morning light. She walked like someone who had slept badly but was not going to mention it. Zorath had asked to meet her here because he had not wanted to do this in a formal setting with staff around them. He had said all the formal things already, in front of the Coalition Council and the Varath senior officers, and through the official diplomatic channels that handled such things. He had expressed the Coalition's gratitude. He had talked about partnership and mutual defense and the importance of the human presence in this region of space. All of that was real, and all of it needed to be said, but it was not what he actually wanted to say. "Colonel," he said when she reached him. "Commander," she replied. She stopped beside him and looked out at the water for a moment. "I used to live near the water," she said. "Different water, different world, but same kind of light in the morning." Zorath looked at her. "Where was that?" "Place called Oregon. It rains there a lot." "Do you miss it?" Donna thought about it for a moment in a way that suggested she was actually considering the question rather than just deflecting it. "Sometimes, when things are quiet." She paused. "It is not quiet very often." "No," Zorath said. "Though I suppose not." They stood in silence for a moment. A salvage vessel moved slowly through the harbor mouth behind a group of Varath workers who were beginning to clear the nearest dock. Farther down the waterfront, 3 of Donna's soldiers were helping a group of Varath civilians move rubble from a collapsed section of wall. You could hear voices, Varath and human mixed together, working out a shared language of gestures and simple words and the universal communication of people who are doing the same job. "I want to be honest with you," Zorath said. Donna looked at him. "Before you came," he continued, "I had already decided that we had lost. Not that we might lose, that we had lost. I was making decisions based on that belief. I was thinking about how to protect the people who could be evacuated and how to make the end as dignified as possible." He paused. "I want you to understand that, because I think I owe it to you." Donna was quiet for a moment. She looked back at the water. "I appreciate that," she said. "How did you know?" Zorath asked. "How did you know it was possible? When we sent that signal, we did not truly believe anything could change. We sent it because there was nothing else left to do. But you came here with 1 ship, and you saw 47 capital ships and a planetary siege array and broken Varath ground forces, and you did not hesitate. You just began working." He shook his head slightly. "How does that happen? How does a person look at something like that and not stop?" Donna looked at him for a moment before answering. Not like she was deciding what to say, but like she was finding the right way to say something she had thought about before. "Humans have a thing," she said slowly. "It is hard to explain even to other humans. When we look at a situation that looks impossible, most of us do not actually process it as impossible. We process it as very difficult. There is a difference. Impossible means stop. Very difficult means figure it out." She picked up a small piece of rubble from the ground near her foot and turned it over in her hand. We have been figuring things out under very bad conditions for a very long time. We come from a world that tried to kill us consistently for hundreds of thousands of years. Disease, cold, predators, each other. We did not win every fight, but we kept getting up. Zorath was quiet. And the ones who did not keep getting up, Donna continued, did not have descendants. So the ones who are left are the ones who kept going no matter what the odds looked like. She set the piece of rubble down on the low wall beside her. It is not courage exactly. It is more like a deep stubbornness. A refusal to accept that a thing is finished until it is actually, completely, undeniably finished. And even then, sometimes, a little past that. Zorath made the sound that, in Vareth language, was the equivalent of a slow exhale of grief and admiration mixed together. It was the sound you made when something was both sad and beautiful at the same time. You took losses, he said. 11 people, Donna said. Her voice did not change, but her jaw tightened slightly. Yes. I am sorry for them. I know you are. She looked at him directly. So am I. Every single day. They stood together quietly for a little while. Down at the dock, someone was laughing, one of the Varath workers responding to something one of the human soldiers had apparently done or said. The sound of it carried across the water, clear and ordinary. There are 14 other worlds, Zorath said. Worlds the Keth took before they came here. Our people are still on those worlds, those who survived. I know, Donna said. I read the files. Will you go to them? Donna looked out at the gray water one more time. Then she turned back toward the city, where her ship was already being resupplied, where her crew was already preparing, and where Dale Owens had almost certainly already calculated 3 different jump routes to the first of the 14 worlds on the list. We are already planning for it, she said. First target is the Dural system. We expect the Keith presence there to be significant, but we have some ideas about the communication relay network they use to coordinate between occupied worlds. If we can disrupt that network, we can isolate their forces on individual planets and deal with them one location at a time. Zorath stared at her. You are talking about taking on an entire occupied star system. One at a time, yes. With one ship. Donna smiled. It was small but real. We may call in some help, but yes, mostly one ship. She started walking back toward the city. The Keth are going to figure out eventually that there is a pattern to what we do. They are going to adapt. That is fine. We will adapt back. She glanced at him over her shoulder. That is what humans do. Zorath watched her walk away. He stood alone by the water for a long time after that, listening to the sounds of rebuilding, feeling the morning air on his face. He thought about everything he had believed 3 days ago, the certainty of loss, the closed door of possibility that he had been standing in front of, pressing his hands against, knowing it would not open. And then one ship had come, carrying soldiers who did not know how to accept that the door was closed, and they had simply walked through it. He turned and looked out at the sky. It was still gray. There was still smoke on the horizon from fires that had not yet burned out. There were still 14 worlds waiting, still full of Keth soldiers. There's still a long and hard road ahead. But the sky above Vareth Prime was empty of Keth ships for the first time in 11 cycles. And somewhere up in that gray, quiet sky, the UES Ironclad was already pointing itself toward the Dural system, carrying 11 fewer souls than it had arrived with. And every one of those who remained was awake and working and thinking about what came next. They were not done. They were, if anything, just getting started.